This is a story of my brother and his wife. My brother married a woman with a child a few years ago. Amelia worked as a waitress at a restaurant where my brother did business. After getting to know each other and dating for a few years, they decided to get married. At first, my parents and I were a little worried when we heard that he was remarrying a woman with a child. The sight on my brother's face as he spent time with Amelia and cared for their new daughter Harper, on the other hand, made us feel truly joyful. So before we knew it, we were watching from afar my brother and his family with peace of mind. My brother, on the other hand, was transferred to another area last year. He wanted Amelia and Harper to move with him, and they had been talking about it. However, Amelia was unable to leave her job at the time, so my brother was forced to move out on his own. But every weekend, he would travel several hours by train to see his family, and he would always call them at night. To be honest, my brother was always harsh to me and could scarcely be described as friendly. So it surprised me that he was so concerned about his family. But I was very happy to see my brother so happy. Then, one day, when I was home with my 3-year-old son on my day off from work, "Can you take care of my daughter for a while?" Amelia called and asked. Amelia and I had exchanged contact information, but this was the first time she had contacted me. When I asked her why, she replied she had to go to her friend's funeral, to which I readily agreed. I'd met Harper before, but this was the first time I'd spent the entire day with her. She was 7 years old, but very mature. She helped me with my chores and was my son's playmate. I had no trouble with her. In fact, she was very helpful. My son, who had never played with other children before, seemed to be having a great time. It made me smile and feel happy too. I even thought that it might be nice to have a sister for him. However, there was no sign of Amelia coming to pick her up at night. I didn't ask Amelia when she'd return, and I was concerned that Harper was experiencing anxiety. It was beyond midnight while I waited with such ideas in my head. I worried whether something had happened to Amelia to prevent her from coming to pick up Harper even at such a late hour. I was more anxious than Harper. In the end, when Amelia came to pick her up, it was past 2 a.m. I was yawning from exhaustion, but Harper was still looking cool, even at this late hour, despite the fact that she was only 7 years old. "I hope you will look after her again," Amelia spoke to me as they were leaving. "Sure." When I told her that, Harper waved happily as she left. Kids stay up late these days. That was my thought as I lay down in bed. I noticed something strange. Amelia was dressed extremely glamorously and beautifully in a one-piece gown, but didn't she claim she was going to a funeral? Amelia's outfit was so flashy that I could vividly remember it even after we parted. It was difficult to imagine she wore that to a funeral. I wondered if she was lying about going to the funeral. But since my brother was working alone and she was raising a child on her alone, I suppose she deserved a break from time to time. I was her sister-in-law, and perhaps she was hesitant to reveal the true reason. If that was the case, I should have been there to assist her because my brother couldn't. With these thoughts in mind, I went to sleep that day. Since that day, however, Amelia has often left Harper in my care. 2 or 3 times a week, always late at night, she would come to pick Harper up. Because of the noise, my son would wake up after he had gone to bed. And because I was staying up late and was out of shape, I gradually began to decline Amelia's request for a favor. Then, my son started going to daycare and I started working part-time. I rarely took care of Harper anymore. About a month had passed since I last saw Harper. My son wanted to meet Harper. "Don't you want to come to visit us with Harper?" I contacted Amelia. I had been refusing for a while, but if Amelia wanted to take a break, I thought it might be okay to take care of Harper for the first time in a while. However, "Thank you, but this time I can't." She declined my invitation. I assumed it was natural for her to have something to do. My son was feeling kind of sad though, so "Let's invite them again another time." I explained to him, and he understood. A few weeks passed without any contact with Amelia. We used to meet one another at the grocery because we lived nearby, but I haven't seen her in a long time. I thought maybe she was busy, but my son also wants to see Harper. So I was thinking of contacting her again. But one day, I was out shopping in town with my son. I saw Amelia walking arm in arm with a man I didn't know. Who's he? Because they were arm in arm, I'm sure they were incredibly intimate. But Amelia was an only child, and I have not heard that she had a close male sibling. Could this be an affair? Unable to speak to her, I decided to secretly follow her with my son in my arms. Then, they went into a typical hotel. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I took a picture of the whole thing, even though I was not a detective. What should I do? I was so confused about whether I should tell my brother or not. My brother seemed very happy after he got married, and there is a saying that ignorance is bliss. But I couldn't keep my mouth shut, so I contacted my brother that night. At first, "I can't believe Amelia is having an affair." My brother didn't believe me, but he seemed to have accepted the situation because he could see Amelia's face in the picture I had sent him. Hearing my brother's sad voice over the phone, I wondered if this was the right thing to do, and I felt bad. But I didn't want to see my brother continue to be deceived. My brother, who had cooled down a bit, asked me, "How's Harper doing?" I was so angered by Amelia's infidelity that I hadn't even thought about Harper. At any rate, the only thing I was sure of was that she wasn't there. Was she been taken care of by someone else, just like I was taking care of her? I told my brother what I suspected, and my brother said he would take a long weekend off and come back once. I decided to wait and see what happened because I was his younger sister and couldn't get any more engaged in his and his wife's problems. In the end, "I appreciate you telling me something difficult to say." He said so, but I hope my brother and Harper won't have a hard time. I could only hope so. However, late the next night, I received a phone call from my brother. I was asleep, but the ringtone woke me up. I answered the phone in my sleep, but a loud voice that I heard woke me up instantly. Please go to my house right away." It was my brother. When I asked my brother what was going on, he answered me in a nervous tone. He told me that he got a call from a payphone earlier, and when he answered, it was Harper, and, "Daddy, help me," she told him that. He called Amelia, but she was completely disconnected. I finally understood the situation after hearing those things. I left my son in my husband's care and immediately drove to my brother's house. The inside of my brother's house, which I could see through the window, was completely dark. There was no sign of anyone. I tried ringing the doorbell, phoning the house phone and Amelia's phone, but there was no answer. What should I do? Harper, where are you? Then I remembered that Harper had contacted my brother from a payphone. I went around the neighborhood looking for Harper. After about 30 minutes of searching, I found Harper lying unconscious on a bench in a small park where there was a payphone. I rushed to her and called her name, but she did not respond. It was winter at that time. She had been outside for hours, and her body was so cold that I was startled and yelled. I immediately called an ambulance. Within 10 minutes, the ambulance arrived, warmed Harper's body, and she regained consciousness. When I arrived at the hospital and saw Harper in a well-lit area, I was shocked. Harper was no longer the healthy-looking girl I knew. Her face was gaunt, her cheeks were hollow, her arms and legs were very frail, and they looked as if they might break at any moment. She had bruises all over her body, and I shivered. When I told my brother about it, he cried over the phone, "Thank you for your help." And he claimed he'd be straight back on the first train the next day. The next day, Harper was still weak, but she could speak normally. "Do you know where your mommy went?" I asked her. Then, "I don't know. She hasn't been back for about 2 weeks," she replied. 2 weeks? Where would she go for 2 weeks without such a small child? I had no idea what she was thinking. I was so angry that I wanted to find Amelia and beat her up right away. But since I was in front of Harper, I suppressed my emotions and continued talking. "What were you eating during all of this time?" I asked Harper, and she said, "My mom gave me $10. She said it would be enough for 2 weeks." Harper's voice sounded sad. I couldn't help but be irritated with myself for not noticing this sooner. That afternoon, my brother came home and saw Harper's changed appearance and cried. And, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He apologized so many times. Harper needed to stay in the hospital for a few more days. I tried to call Amelia, but her phone was still disconnected. So we went to my brother's place. When we entered the house, we found an even more unbelievable scene. The phone lines had been severed. There was no sign of life, and there was a sandwich wrapper from a convenience store on the floor. My brother seems to have made a decision based on this. And after Harper's condition had stabilized, he had a serious chat with her. "You know that I'm not really your dad, right?" Harper looked stunned for a moment at his frank comments, but She nodded her head with a slightly sad expression on her face.
But I consider you as my real child.
My brother said it in the gentlest voice possible, patting Harper on the head. I think you are my real daddy too. I thought about buying a sandwich with the last of my money, but more than that, I wanted to hear your voice, Daddy. Harper's words brought tears to my eyes. My brother cried hard, and then he hugged Harper tightly.
I can't forgive what your mom did to you. What Mommy did was really wrong. That's why I'm thinking of getting a divorce. Do you know what divorce is?
Harper nodded slightly.
But at the same time, I am ashamed of myself for not noticing how difficult your situation was. So, for that, I want you to let me protect you from now on. You may be anxious about your mommy's absence, but I will love you and protect you. Why don't you come live with me?
My brother's voice was the kindest and straightest I had ever heard. Harper broke into sobs, as if everything she had been keeping back had finally come to an end. Okay. She nodded and hugged my brother. I couldn't hold back my tears either. Despite the fact that my brother and Harper were not biological relatives, I recognized that there was a deep family connection between them. I wanted to be of some help to them both. I offered to take care of Harper for the next 2 months while my brother was away for his work. Harper seemed to enjoy her previous stay at our home and was very happy. After that, things went fairly smoothly, and my brother was given divorce and custody of the child. We also filed a report of child abandonment, and Amelia is currently being interviewed by the police. She will be charged with a crime in the near future. And Harper is staying with us while my brother is away. She is still a good and reliable sister to our kid. She seemed to have opened up to my husband and myself and cheerfully tells us about events at school. She ate a lot of food and became a healthy girl again. She calls my brother every day and smiles happily. She is enjoying her life right now and is looking forward to the new days she will spend with my brother when he comes back. She might not be alive now if she had opted to buy a sandwich instead of making a phone call back then. Harper has overcome such a harsh life so far with her small body. I hope that Harper will lead a happy life from now on. I've been working in an office for 3 years and currently have a girlfriend. I met her as a university student and we began dating. Every day after we started dating was a lot of fun, and even after I started working, we always went on dates on our days off. Even if we couldn't see each other, we would frequently call each other when we had the opportunity. She really loved to call. I love to hear your voice. She used to say that to me. However, I never expected her to do something like that. It was one of my days off. I had a day off from work, so I planned to go out with her that day. But she told me, "Sorry, I can't go today." Avery texted me to let me know she couldn't see me. She was bad at texting and using the internet and preferred to call me, so she always told me over the phone, no matter how insignificant the matter was. But I was perplexed because she texted me this time. I tried calling her, but there was no answer. I wondered if she was in some kind of situation where she couldn't call me. I was concerned about her unusual behavior, so I went to her house. When I arrived at Avery's house, I quickly called her over the intercom and waited in the hallway. I wondered if something was wrong. Various anxieties were going through my mind. Then I heard the WhatsApp notification and looked at my phone screen. Jack? It was a text from Avery. I had no idea as to why she didn't answer the intercom, despite the fact that she was aware of it. Yeah, it's me. Anyway, can you open the door? I replied to the message. After a while, okay, I'll open it now. I received that message. I saw her face when Avery opened the door, and her eyes were bright red and swollen. I could only guess that she was crying, but I had no idea what was going on. Hey, what happened? I was worried about you. I asked Avery, but she did not answer me. Are you feeling sick? I asked her, but she remained silent. Then she sat down on a chair, grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, and began to write some words. I can't speak. She showed me the paper with this written on it. In my mind, I understood why she couldn't make a phone call, but I had not expected Avery to suddenly lose her voice. I was surprised, but we went to the hospital right away, and when she was diagnosed, she was told she had psychogenic dysphonia. It appeared to happen frequently to young women as a result of stress and other factors. Avery was depressed and numb when she learned of her diagnosis. Avery had changed jobs, and despite the change in environment, she was working without incident. She was not aware of the stress at all, and this seemed to have shocked her even more. I went to her house every day and tried to cheer her up somehow. But I was unsure how I should speak to and encourage Avery now that she had lost her voice. I couldn't find the right words to say to her. Then one day, I was on my way home after work. I have something important to discuss with you. I received a message from Avery. I rushed to her house. I arrived in about 20 minutes, and as soon as I called her over the intercom and went inside, with a trembling hand, she held out a piece of paper with some words written on it. On the paper, I want you to break up with me. That was written. I was speechless because I was taken aback by the words. Avery was watching me and restarted writing on the paper. I'm sure I'm annoying you. I don't want to bother you. I don't want to be a woman who can't speak. Avery finished her writing and showed it to me. When I saw the paper, I almost cried, but I quickly took it away, turned it around, and wrote, No way! I will never break up with you. I don't ever want to break up with you. If it's too hard for you to talk, I won't talk either. I appreciate your kindness, which I can sense even without hearing your voice. Are you willing to marry me? That was my proposal's word. I knew Avery could hear me, but because she is unable to communicate verbally, I also expressed my feelings to her in writing. When I showed Avery the paper, tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded her head and wrote on the paper's edge, Thank you. Are you sure you want to marry someone like me? So, of course, I want you to stay with me forever. That's what I wrote back. From that day on, we started living together. Avery quit her job and supported me as a housewife. Because she supported me, I was able to work harder. Our communication was mostly written or through gestures. We had some communication difficulties, but even so, it was enjoyable, and we lived happily together. Our life together was going well, As a lazy person, Avery was a huge help to me. My day started with Avery waking me up in the morning. Avery has to wake me up first because I'm terrible at getting out of bed in the morning. When I awoke, a warm and delicious breakfast was waiting for me, and she had also prepared lunch for me. When I got home from work, she had prepared a delicious dinner and had learned to cook according to my preferences, which was simply delicious. We often went on dates together on our days off. We sometimes spent our days off at home. But we usually went shopping, saw a movie, went for a drive, and did a variety of other activities. It was a quiet drive with no conversation, but it was a lot of fun. We lived together like that for about a year. We were no longer communicating in writing at that point, but rather through WhatsApp messages. I suggested that using emoji and stickers to express our emotions would be quicker and easier. At one time, "What should we do about the wedding?" I texted her. "I don't believe the ceremony is necessary," she replied. I knew that she really wanted to have a wedding. Before she became mute, I used to ask Avery questions about our wedding, such as what kind of ceremony she preferred, what kind of gown she preferred, and so on. I knew that she even bought wedding magazines. How could she not want to have a wedding? Avery was probably concerned that she would cause problems for others. But if I help her, there will be no problem. I wanted Avery to have her dream wedding. That's why, while working, I worked so hard to prepare for the wedding. Then came the wedding day. She woke me up as usual on the morning of the wedding. We both laughed at how pathetic it was that I had to be awake on such an important day. We ate the breakfast she had prepared, and then went to the place where the wedding would be held. We took a cab to the wedding venue. Avery must have been nervous on the way there because she held my hand tighter than usual. "It's going to be okay." For the first time in a long time, I spoke to her. Hearing my words, she smiled and nodded, and we walked together to the ceremony location. We finally arrived at the venue. We prepared for the wedding. I finished my preparations surprisingly quickly and waited anxiously for Avery to finish hers. As I was waiting in the other room, there was a knock at the door. "Sir, the bride is ready." That's how they called me, and I went to the room where Avery was waiting for me. It was time to see Avery in her wedding gown. I was nervous, and I was overjoyed when I saw her in her wedding gown. "You were absolutely magnificent," I told Avery. She couldn't speak, but she moved her lips and said, "Thank you." I was able to read her lips. Finally, the wedding ceremony began. The ceremony went smoothly, and it was time for the final speech. "Thank you for joining us today to celebrate." I began to talk about Avery. I talked about how we met, how we got together, and many other things. Of course, I told him about how she lost her voice. Avery stood by my side as I continued to speak into the microphone. Then I heard Avery sobbing. I was startled by the sound she made, and although I was in the middle of my speech, "Please excuse me for a second," I interrupted for a second. "Avery?" Avery took my microphone and said, "Thank you." Her voice was strained. I was in the middle of my speech when the audience applauded so loudly that I didn't have to finish it. The applause was so loud that I could not stop crying. The wedding was a great success. I was overjoyed to be able to celebrate this special day. And now I am living happily with my wife, who has regained her voice. Avery has not returned to work and is now a full-time housewife. We sometimes play with each other by communicating through writing and remembering those days. Those days were indeed hard for her. But those were also happy times with my wife Avery. And according to Avery, it wasn't easy, but it made me happier, and I enjoyed spending time with you. That's what she says to me every time we talk about those days. Even now, my wife and I communicate our emotions through eye contact and gestures on occasion. I am a regular office worker in my 20s. I am not married and don't even have a boyfriend. I work all day, every day, and have not had the chance to meet anyone. My company is a typical exploitative company, and I always return home by the last train. I hardly have any days off. I had been working as a part-time customer service worker since I was a student, and I always wanted to work where I could interact with people. So when I graduated from college, all I wanted to do was work in sales. My friends were surprised to see me willingly choosing sales, famous for a hot job. But even after I actually started working at the company, I enjoyed working there because I felt it was very rewarding at the beginning. I really enjoyed interacting with customers. It was my pleasure to see their happy faces with the words "thank you" to me. But after 2 or 3 years passed, I no longer had time to think about that. Subordinates came in, and I was responsible for instructing newcomers. In addition to that, I had my own work. Moreover, when I turned 25 years old, I took new position, so I had to involved in that. Instead of getting used to the job and getting more comfortable, my responsibilities piled up, and it became harder and harder. But the feeling that my boss expects me to do my best still inspires me to work harder. I managed to work every day. But somewhere along the way, I knew that I was nearing my physical and mental limits. Then, one day, I was walking my usual route to the station. As I was walking up the pedestrian bridge on my way to the station, a child running from the front slipped. I quickly guarded the child and fell down the stairs. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. It seemed I had lost my consciousness. "Oh, I have to go to work," I said to myself. "You can't do that." I heard a voice nearby. "Who is it?" I turned my head towards the voice and saw a doctor standing. He seemed to have heard what I said. "You must have hit your head when you fell down the stairs, and you had a concussion and passed out. It's not life-threatening, but you need to rest a while. You also have a broken leg, so it will take a month or 2 to full recovery." Then the doctor left the room. Finally, my foggy head became clear, and I remembered what had happened to me. Later, I heard that the child I guarded only suffered a graze wound. She came to visit me later with her parents. I would be hospitalized overnight. This means that I cannot go to work today. I can go to work after tomorrow, but I won't be able to run around on business as usual. I let out a sigh. This sigh was not because of the injury, but I thought of the trouble I would cause to the company because of my absence. With the doctor's permission, I called my boss and explained the situation. My boss sighed and seemed clearly got an eye. although he said that I had no choice. I know firsthand experience how busy the company is right now, so I can fully understand why my boss was like this. However, I still felt sad to be treated in this way when I was in such a weakened state after the accident. To my boss, I said, "I am truly sorry for causing you any trouble," and apologized several times before hanging up the phone and going to sleep anyway, so that I would not have to think about unpleasant things. I've been so busy at work lately that I always take the last train to home and go to bed at almost 2 a.m. I had to be at work by 7 in the morning, so I couldn't get a good night's sleep or any free time to do anything. My own home became a place where I just sleep mostly for a few hours. I decided to take a good rest while I was in hospital. I just closed my eyes except for meal times. I was able to rest physically and mentally. I haven't slept this well for a long time. The next day, the final checkup came out clear, so I was allowed to leave the hospital. The doctor told me, "There is no problem if you go back to work, but please do not overdo it." That's all he said. I called my boss and told him that I was discharged from the hospital. He asked me to come in tomorrow as soon as possible. He told me that there are jobs that can be done even with crutches, so he wanted me to come in right away. Because I had been kind of in the same rhythm at work every day like a machine, I had never thought or questioned much about it. But once I left that rhythm, I felt really bad about returning to my busy life. I wonder if I'll be okay like this. My boss was still in a bad mood on the phone. I was thinking about that on the way to home. It was the first time for me to walk with crutches, but I gradually got used to it as I walked slowly. At the beginning, I thought I might be able to make it, but it took me 2 hours to get home. It usually takes me about 30 minutes to get there. My arms and shoulders were sore, and when I arrived home, I was exhausted. I rested on the sofa for a while. In the evening, I got hungry, so I headed to the kitchen to make a simple dinner for the time being. But my crutches got caught on the table leg, and I fell down. It is quite difficult to use crutches in a small house. I had to cook, but there was no way I could cook while on crutches. I had to stand on one leg most of the time. At the beginning, I had no problem at all, but as time went by, it became tougher and tougher. I managed to finish preparing my supper, but then another problem arose. I had to take my dish from the kitchen to the dining table, but now I cannot walk without crutches. If I use crutches, my hands are full. I cannot hold a plate with food on it. So, I decided on a strategy of balancing on crutches with only one hand and advancing one step at a time with one leg. I proceeded to be careful not to spill the food when balancing myself. Things were going well in the beginning, but I got distracted halfway through and lost my balance. I was able to hold on to the dining table and avoided falling myself, but I did drop a plate. The plate didn't break, but the food spread on the floor. It was a disaster. I almost cried and cleaned up the mess. I didn't feel like cooking anymore and decided to go to a nearby convenience store to get some food. It was a 10-minute walk to the convenience store. At my current speed, it would take me about 20 minutes. But I was hungry and there was no way I was not going to eat. I gotta be prepared for work tomorrow. I headed to the convenience store, but as expected, it took me 20 minutes to get there. By the time I got home, I was so exhausted that I forgot that I was hungry. After that, every single action I usually do without thinking, such as taking a bath or getting ready for bed, now it has become an ordeal for me. It's my home that I was used to, but it was incredibly difficult just because I was crippled in one leg. It was like a place I didn't know. Then, I managed to get ready for bed and try to sleep earlier. I was tired, but for some reason, I could not fall asleep. The depressing thought of going to work tomorrow, that would take more than twice as long as usual. The fact that my boss would be sarcastic with me, and that I would definitely be late getting home because I couldn't work effective as usual. No one cares about me, even though I am injured, and my mind becomes more and more exhausted. But I'm spoiled to feel this way. I'm a working adult, so I have to manage on my own. I did not tell my parents that I am injured because they live far away from me. I didn't want them to be worried. In the end, I couldn't sleep more than a few hours because I was thinking too many things. Then, the next day, I woke up and checked the clock as usual. Then I realized that I had made a mistake. Out of habit, I had set my alarm for the same time as usual. I usually have time to spare, but with my current pace, I would never make it on time. Sure enough, I was walking slower than usual, even though I thought I was walking at a brisk pace. I looked for a cab on the way, but couldn't find one. I barely made it onto a train that was much later than my usual. As a result, I was about 30 minutes late. Of course, I made a phone call on the way to the office, but my boss gave me a stern warning right in front of my subordinates. Do you think you can get away with anything just because you have a broken bone? You missed 2 days of work and you're late again today. Are you going to do your job or what? I heard that during the 2 days I was absent, some people, including my boss, were working so hard that they could not even catch the last train. I am truly sorry. Apologizing is all I could do. My subordinates were silent behind me, looking at me awkwardly. After my boss scolded me, I tried my best to finish my work that had piled up yesterday and the day before yesterday. But I can hardly make any progress on with this leg. Even though I work at a desk, I have to make copies, go looking for documents, and use my feet more than I expected. And if it only hindered my own work, my slow movement was getting in the way of others. My boss saw that and said, I can't get my work done when you're around. That's enough. Go home on time until your fracture heals. I'll give your work to someone else. She said that with very cold tone of voice. Listening what my boss said to me, others had a cold look on me. I told them I didn't want to trouble them anymore. They said that it would be more inconvenient that I stay here, and I had no choice but to leave. As you can imagine, I was quite depressed. Even if I try to make up for the trouble I have caused, I end up causing even more trouble. I felt as if I was being denied everything I had worked so hard for the past 8 years since I started to work there. I left work on time and took twice more than usual time to return home again. I had forgotten about it because I always take the last train home. But going home on time meant that I was right in the middle of the rush hour. The train was packed. Normally, I would be able to force myself to get on a train even if it was packed so tightly. But with my crutches, there was no way I could get on the train so packed. However, the situation remained the same even after I had to forego a few trains. I had no choice but to get on the next train. I thought I would only have to endure for a few stops, but I was wrong. It was too cramped. People stepped on my broken leg and pushed me. Since it was a very crowded train, the pushing was probably not intentional. But I could tell the person who stepped on my foot was certainly intentional. Perhaps they were annoyed with me taking up space in the cramped train. "Oh, please don't step on my foot." But I was ignored, and I spent more than 10 minutes trying to move my foot away, but I couldn't. I was scolded at my work. My work was not going well, and I was irritating other people on the train. All of these things were caused by my injury, but my heart was completely frozen with no one to turn to. As if to push me into a corner. When I went outside of the station, it was raining strongly. "Oh, great. Why do all these unfortunate things keep happening?" I almost cried and ended up talking to myself. I don't have an umbrella today, and even if I did, I couldn't even hold it up with my crutches. I thought about taking shelter and waiting for the rain to slow down. But everything was going wrong, and I was feeling so desperate that I decided to walk out in the rain with my crutches. The rain gradually became heavier and heavier. Under the heavy rain, I waited for the traffic light to turn green as I was drenched. People were staring at me, wondering if they were feeling sorry for me or if it was rare to see a woman soaking wet and walking with crutches. I didn't care what people think of me anymore. I just stood there. Suddenly, "Excuse me?" I heard a voice from a little far away. Is someone talking to somebody? I just stared at the red light. "Excuse me? Excuse me, miss?" This time, I hear a voice right next to me, so I turned to the direction of the voice in surprise. I saw a woman about my age, with a slender figure and her hair pulled back in a bun. "Are you all right? It will be dangerous if you slip, so please let me take you home." I had never met her before, but she put me under her umbrella and offered taking me home. At first I hesitated and declined, but she insisted that she could not abandon a woman walking alone in such heavy rain with clutches. Besides, she was offering me most of her umbrella while we were having this conversation. She was getting wetter and wetter from the rain. Seeing her like that, I decided to take her offer. She went along with me without complaining, keeping up with my pace as I couldn't walk fast with my crutches. She really did take me home. By the time I arrived home, I felt so happy that I had forgotten all about the bad and painful things I had been through. It was as if her kindness had mellowed my heart. And on the way she told me, "Actually, I saw you before. There was a crowd of people on the street, so I went to look what's going on, and I saw you lying there. I asked a person nearby, and he said you fell down protecting a girl. I thought, wow, that's amazing, so cool. There really are people in this world who sacrifice themselves to help others. So I couldn't help talking to you." I was kind of embarrassed. shy, and happy, so I couldn't look at her face. She also told me many other stories. She spoke cheerfully and said she was the same age as me and lived close by. Even though we had never met before, I felt somewhat at ease with her. I told her everything from the day I broke my leg to today, as if my mind had blown up. When she heard that, she said, "What kind of company is that? That's terrible. No matter how busy they are, it's not right to talk like that to someone who is suffering from an injury. If you want your work to go smoothly, shouldn't the company provide adequate support?" She got angry at maltreatment I got at my workplace. I felt like crying when I heard that, but I was embarrassed to cry, so I held it in. When we reached home, I felt kind of sad to say goodbye. Then she said, "I'm Jessica. May I ask your name?" She smiled. I'm Stephanie." I was so happily answered, and we exchanged contact information. 1 year has passed since then, and I can walk without crutches now. I hang out with Jessica frequently since then, and she has become my best friend. With Jessica's advice, I resigned from the company I was working for. I have been working for other company as salesperson for about 6 months now. Unlike old one, I can adjust my own schedule now, so I don't have to work late to catch the last train to go home. And I am blessed with good relationships within the company. And as Jessica said, no one is ever sarcastic to a sick person. I may have stuck myself and my thoughts in that way for a long time. When I told my parents about my injury, they scolded me, not telling them right away. Jessica taught me that if I ever be in a difficult situation, it is important to say so and ask someone for help. I got injured and got tired of life and human society. But I realized that there is definitely a tender world out there. Even if you have the desire to help someone, it takes courage to actually take action. But I believe that courage will be multiple times powerful for those who were helped. I want to be a person who can help others if I see them in trouble anytime.